Correct. As I was saying before I was interrupted, I am Major General Alexander Hamilton, late Secretary of the Treasury in the administration of His Excellency President Washington.
And I am Thomas Jefferson, author of the American Declaration of Independence, of the Statute of Virginia for Religious Freedom, and father of the University of Virginia.
When the committee drafted the Declaration of Independence, I was serving as a soldier in New York. New York is my state, you know.
I hardly think that being from New York is anything to brag about, if you ask me.
No one asked you.
George Washington is from Virginia, which also happens to be my state.
Since you bring up...
They like George Washington.
Apparently we have a lot of Virginians in the House.
Yes.
All right. Since you mentioned General Washington, perhaps we could get a volunteer, someone to be General Washington. Someone to be General Washington.
Look over there. Look at him right there. He's
Come on.
Go this way?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. About the right height.
Step right this way. Very good.
Right here.
General Washington, here's your sword. There we are.
Careful.
Careful with that.
Careful. Vote for Hamilton.
Thank you for
I
your
always
faith.
suspected as much of you, General. But let's get on with the rest of what we're talking about. General Washington is, of course, a gentleman. That means he never walks anywhere. He always travels where he goes on his noble steed. Mr. Hamilton, what was General Washington's horse's name again?
His horse was called Nelson.
Ah, Nelson, right.
There we are, General Washington. General Washington, even though you are from Virginia, you will admit that it is not the states that are important, it is the nation as a whole. Yes?
Yes.
Ah, there we are.
General Washington, you yourself risked your life, your sacred honor, your fortune, to defend the principles of the Declaration of Independence. And as you well know, you had it read to your troops when you received it, that the Declaration of Independence clearly states that these former colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. Elsewhere, in the Declaration of Independence, we refer to the state of Great Britain. In the Declaration of Independence, the words...
I would
it's not a good
advise against that.
That's a bad idea.
I've seen some nasty accidents that way.
Really. It's all fun and games until someone pokes out a colony. That's what we just said. The word state in the Declaration of Independence, when referring to Great Britain, means a country. That means when we refer to our free and independent states, they're just like Great Britain or France. So Massachusetts is its own country, and Georgia is its own country, and New Jersey is definitely its own country, etc., etc. Thus, from the very beginning, we defined the states as independent. We should not forget that when we remember they are their own nations and thus more important.
General Washington, you remember during the war, where very often the states would act on their own without national authority, pulling against our national... For example, the Commonwealth of Virginia, they would send orders directly to our ministers negotiating a peace treaty in France with Great Britain. They would send orders to Dr. Franklin, John Jay, John Adams, bypassing the federal government altogether. And that's the sort of thing we had during the war. You remember that. That's not the way it ought to be. We must be one strong nation, not 13 separate little countries. That way, it is, of course, the nation that is more important, yes?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
But General Washington, you can imagine a day, perhaps, that because our federative principle has no limits, someday America might even reach as far as the great Pacific Ocean, right? Perhaps, maybe in 1,000 generations. Yes. When that happens, if we have a strong central government, each new state that goes westward will be more distant from the central government. We had a revolution to get rid of a distant, unresponsive central government. We don't want to replace it with the same problem, but if upon this Republican federative principle of mine, where the states have supremacy, with each new state, the people in the state can easily travel to their state government and tell their state government if they don't like what they're doing or if they like what they're doing. Because the people then will be able to participate in the more powerful government. They will be more willing, more eager to participate. Whereas if they feel like their opinion doesn't matter because the government's too far away and doesn't pay attention, they're going to give up. And our dreams of a strong republic will be doomed. Thus, the states not only ought to be more important, but must be more important for America to survive.
But General, you will admit that even though the states may be geographically closer to the people, very often local bitter rivalries will crop up, regional disputes which will lead to gross unfairness. Perhaps one school against another might lead to gross unfairness, where a reserved or a federal government is reserved and far away and impartial, yes? And it is, as Cicero says, when two laws stand direct confrontation one with the other, it is the law that affects the greater number of people, hence the nation, that must be held in preeminence. Thus, the nation is more important, yes?
Yes.
Thank you, General Washington.
But General Washington, I agree with part of what Mr. Hamilton just said. In any issue where the entire nation is affected, the nation must be supreme. The states must act as one. So foreign warfare and foreign commerce, interstate commerce, but in every issue in which only an individual state is affected, we will overload the states with regulations from a government that doesn't even know what it's talking about because it's too distant. And it will encumber our governmental system, slow everything down, make it far too expensive, and destroy our hopes of a system. No, the majority of the responsibilities are local. The majority of government is local. Therefore, the authority ought to remain local in the states.
But General, I think you'll own that the states very often take on more authority than they ought to have and try to influence the rest of the country, yes?
Yes.
Yes, so no, it is the nation that is more important.
The states are more important?
The states certainly have their say, but it is the nation that is more important.
The nation has limited authority in certain highly regulated areas, but the states are more important.
Nation.
The states.
Nation.
States.
Nation.
States.
Nation. Sorry, General.
I apologize, General. You seem to have gotten between us.
Let's give General Washington
Well,
a round of applause.
He held up well.
Thank you very much, General.
Well done. Well done.
Now, who amongst you can tell me what is the name of the government that we had during the War of Independence? Yes. Okay, apparently not. Yes. Yes, you. Yeah. Yes, that's the continent we're on, but we're on the continent of the Americas. Yes. Well, I would rather it had been a central government. But
Someone called it out over here, actually.
Yes, yes, sir.
It begins with an A. Do you know what the name of the government is we had during the war? Yes? The Articles of Confederation.
Articles of Confederation. Well said. Thank you. Thank you. Now, what were some of the difficulties with the Articles of Confederation? Yes. It was very difficult to tax. Yeah, what else? Yes. It was difficult to
enforce the laws made.
Yes, enforce the laws.
Yeah.
Anything else? Yes. Too much power to the states.
No, he
Absolutely.
said problems. Problems,
Absolutely.
not good parts.
And it was just a legislature. There was no executive branch. There was no judiciary. It was a legislature that, as you mentioned earlier, did not even have the power to collect its own taxes. Taxes in those days were all collected by the individual states and then passed on to the federal government. Well, I suppose you know how that worked. The states would collect the taxes, they would use what they needed, and then before passing it on to the federal government, they'd look about and say, oh, you know, there's a bridge that needs mending over here, and the streets need repaving, the ports are a mess. Well, by the time the states had done with it, there was rarely anything left to pass on to the federal government. Besides, the Articles of Confederation made each state completely equal. One vote apiece. As a consequence, nothing ever got done.
No, the Articles of Confederation did not make the states equal. The Articles of Confederation made the states the same. The sameness and equality are very different concepts. You must not confuse them with one another. If we had merely amended the Articles of Confederation to have made the states represented based on population, that would have gone a long way to have fixed the problem.
A simple amendation of the Articles would not do. Your own James Madison spoke out against it as the anarchy of our system. No, it worked so poorly that in 1787 we had to meet to form a new government. Representatives came from all 13 states, except Rhode Island.
Rhode Island.
And we met at the State House in Philadelphia. Now, there were many distinguished gentlemen who were there. His Excellency General Washington was there, and Dr. Franklin as well. And it was a good thing because they were so famous that they lent an authority to the convention by their mere presence. But there were 4 major plans put forward at the convention.
4? I thought there were only 3 plans put forward at the Constitutional Convention.
There were 4 plans put forward at the convention.
Well, I know I was in France at the time, but
there were 4 plans.
I could be sure.
There were 4.
Because I was away. When the Constitution was written, I was representing America and France. I don't have first-hand knowledge, so perhaps for my own review, we could go through the plans to refresh my memory. Well, of course, there was, let's see, James Madison's plan.
Virginia plan.
Yes.
Representation based on population.
Right. And then there was, of course, the smaller states didn't like that. And then there was William Paterson of New Jersey's plan.
Each state gets an equal number of representatives.
Hardly fair to the large states. And then, of course, Roger Sherman of Connecticut came up with the compromise with the Senate representing the smaller states, equal representation. The House of Representatives representing the larger states, proportional representation. It's 1, 2, 3. That's only 3 plans. I don't recall a 4th plan of note.
There was my plan, the Hamilton plan. I stood up and gave a speech on a number of topics on government of great consequence.
Yes, I recall hearing about this speech of yours. As Mr. Madison informed me, your speech was some 6 hours long.
And not a moment wasted. I hope you've got some time today. No, my ideas are too complex to be squeezed into a paltry 1 or 2 hour speech.
As I was informed, the majority of your plan was based almost entirely on the British form of government.
The longest lasting form of government in the world.
Yes, well, no wonder people call you a monarchist.
I am not a monarchist.
Yet many people believe that you are.
I am not a monarchist.
And yet you did propose, what did you call it, an elective monarch who would rule for life as would a king?
An unfortunate choice of words, but I am not a monarchist.
He's a monarchist.
Never mind. Now, as I said, there were many distinguished gentlemen who were there. William Paterson of New Jersey was there. Can we get someone to be William Paterson?
Who would like to be William?
Who would like to be William Paterson of New Jersey? Let's see. What about right there? You. Yes. Come.
Please, madam. Now, what is your name, my friend? Isabel. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance.
Hi.
But for the time being, you are not Isabel, you are William Paterson. Right?
Okay.
Everyone say, hi, William Paterson.
Hello, William Paterson.
Now, William Paterson was not born in New Jersey, even though he represented New Jersey in the Constitutional Convention. William Paterson was born in Ireland, and he emigrated to the United States. Do you speak any Irish, William Paterson?
Yeah.
Yes, you speak Irish?
I am Irish.
Well, let's give you an Irish hat then.
No.
Yes, too late. Too late. Just bear with us. Oh, she's so sad. He's so sad. Now, don't worry. We'll take it back later. Now, William Paterson, you are Irish, but you don't speak any Irish. Can you speak in an Irish accent? No. We'll give it a try. No? We'll give it a try. Do your best. I have here on this... Did you pick that up? On this piece of paper, I have a traditional Irish expression of greeting. I've not been to Ireland, but I hear that a lot of people say it, very common, but it's translated into English. So give this a try and say it with your best Irish accent. Don't worry if you... give it a try. Shouldn't you give it a try? For your friends, give it a try, right? Yes, all right, give it a try. Here you go, and your best Irish accent.
Have you read this?
No, just read it. I haven't read it.
They're always after my Lucky Charms.
Huh? Was that a good accent? Was that good? No, all right. Don't worry about the accent then. William Patterson, I would like you to share with everyone here your idea from the Constitutional Convention, all right? Yeah, stop. And you're not allowed to giggle, so here we are. Nice and, oh, for God's sakes. Here we are. Try to hold it together.
We are not allowed to make a new government. All states should be represented equally, just like in the Articles of Confederation.
Well done. Well said, Mr. Patterson. And now, I will not make you wear that hat anymore. Give Mr. Patterson a round of applause. Well done.
General Washington was there again as well. General, can we have you back? General, where did you go? There we are, General Washington, everyone. General Washington, and here's your sword.
It is 1787. The Revolutionary War is long over now.
Right. Sorry, give me the sword. Have a pen.
After all, the pen is mightier than the sword.
Depends on who's holding it. Now, General Washington presided over the convention as its president, where he said...
Oh, everyone, this is His Excellency George Washington. That means that everyone in America listens more closely when he speaks than when average people speak. So, I want you all to sit up straight, nice and quiet, lean forward, put your best ear forward
Stay right here.
to what George Washington is about to say. Listen now quietly, quiet down. Listen carefully.
All right. General Washington said...
Nothing.
What?
Nothing? What do you mean nothing?
What do you mean?
There's nothing on the... Oh, there's nothing on the... Yes, that's right. General Washington said nothing. General Washington hardly spoke at all during the debates.
Oh.
You see, he knew how much everyone respected him, and knew as well that if he backed a measure, no one would listen to any of the arguments on the other side. They would simply do as he wanted. Since General Washington wanted the debates to proceed in a rational manner, he remained silent so as to avoid abusing his great authority. Let's give General Washington a round of applause.
Well done.
Thank you, General. Well done. Now, Mr. Jefferson here is a Virginian. He wasn't there. General Washington is a Virginian. There was another Virginian who was there by the name of James Madison. Now, we're calling for James Madison, and later we're going to call for a Roger Sherman. They must be good readers. So who would like to be James Madison? James Madison. Very good.
Let's see, they're looking for someone.
Sorry?
You know, the lady with the spectacles there and the pink
Lady
shirt.
with the spectacles.
Yes.
Where's that?
The
Yes.
lady with
All right,
spectacles and the pink
spectacles.
shirt there, yes.
Very good. Step right on down. Very quickly. This way. Very good. James Madison, everyone. Now, James Madison and I, at that time, we saw eye to eye. Literally, he's just a bit shorter than I am.
Who are you calling short?
Why don't you go back to France?
Just saying.
All right, now James Madison knew we could no longer operate under the Articles of Confederation. James Madison had a plan. James, I would like you to read your plan, if you will.
We should make a strong central government. Bigger states should have more congressmen than small states.
Thank you. Well said,
Well
James.
said.
Thank you, Mary. Return to
Well
your
done,
seat.
James Madison. Well done. Well done.
Bigger states should have more congressmen than small states. But it was not so simple. Your ideas of equality, Mr. Jefferson, are not so simple either. Just ask one of your slaves. Well, the trouble at the convention was that the small states did not want to be overpowered by the larger states. They wanted each state to have an equal number of representatives. But this is hardly fair to the states with the much greater populations. This almost stopped the convention and kept us from having a new government until Roger Sherman of Connecticut came up with the compromise. Who would like to be Roger Sherman? We should take someone from the back. Yeah. No, stop. No,
Whoa,
back.
wait.
Stop.
No, hold.
Not you.
Hold. Mr. Pickles.
No.
Not you either. Over.
No. You. Yes, you.
There we are. It's difficult when they're that far back. That was hard.
But I don't know why. Come on down. Come on down. What's your name? Anthony. I'm sorry, Anthony. I would have said Anthony, but I didn't know that was your name. So, Anthony, everyone. Anthony is going to be our Roger Sherman. Roger Sherman, here are your shoes. No, you'll find out why. Now, Roger Sherman had begun life as a cobbler's apprentice. But instead of making shoes all day and having fun all night, Roger Sherman borrowed books and studied assiduously until he had learned enough to become a lawyer instead of a shoemaker. Pays better too, doesn't it?
Yes.
You betcha. Now, Roger Sherman said that summer of 1787...
What size are your feet?
My feet are about an 8.5.
Oh,
Why?
about 12, I suppose.
Oh, sorry. It's on the other side here. We really ought to sort these out before we get here.
I thought we did.
All right, sorry. The other thing that Roger Sherman said the summer of 1787.
I have a great compromise. We should divide the legislature into two parts. In the House of Representatives, the bigger states get more representatives than the smaller states. But in the Senate, all states get 2 senators each.
Thank you very much. Well done, Roger Sherman.
Well done, sir. Well done.
And so it was that we established a government that firmly acknowledged the fact that states, like men, are not all created equal. If we had tried to continue to force that false equality on everyone, our government would have continued to fail. Instead, our government strikes a balance between those aspects of the states and the people that make them alike and those things that set them apart.
Now, toward the end of the convention, the grand figures who were in attendance became very important. One of them particularly, Dr. Benjamin Franklin. Who would like to be
Dr. Benjamin Franklin. Dr. Benjamin. What about...
Do you have an idea?
This young lady, yes.
Oh, in the front
Articles of Confederation lady.
All right,
yeah.
certainly. Oh, yes, she knew the Articles of Confederation. Here, Dr. Franklin, have a seat. And here is your kite.
And the key.
And your key.
You sort out what happens.
Now, Dr. Franklin was born in 1706. So by 1787, he was much older than the average person in our day lived. So Dr. Franklin was a very old man. Dr. Franklin's feet hurt terribly. He had the gout. So they made a special chair for him where the prisoners from the jail, the Walnut Street jail across the street from Independence Hall, would carry him to Independence Hall and back home every day. So he never had to get up at all, not even to fly a kite. He had many wise ideas. He was famous throughout the world as a scientist and a philosopher. So, Dr. Franklin, I would like you to share with everybody here one of your wise and famous ideas. Can you do that? Okay. All right.
I think our national bird should be a turkey.
Our national bird should be a turkey? Really?
Yes. Yeah,
really?
You tell him. Yes. Yes. That wasn't all, though. He had more ideas as well. When the delegates left Independence Hall on September 17th of 1787, many of the people in town approached Dr. Franklin because he was the most approachable. He was the friendliest of all the delegates. Well, Dr. Franklin, show them how friendly you are. Show them. Just show them. You see how friendly he is? So a number of the townspeople in Philadelphia approached you and asked you, Dr. Franklin, what kind of government have you given us? To which you responded,
a republic, if you can keep it.
A republic, if you can keep it. Give Dr. Franklin a round of applause.
Thank you, Dr. Franklin.
Well done, Dr. Franklin.
And thus, we had a new government, yes? No. You see, we hadn't actually been sent to Philadelphia to create a new government, but only to amend the Articles of Confederation.
You overstepped your mandate, didn't you?
Well, perhaps, but...
Wouldn't be the first time.
Hold on a moment.
Or the last.
We all, at the convention, felt it was our only recourse.
Just because you have the power to do something does not mean you have the authority.
You're talking about the bank. You said we weren't going to talk about the bank.
Yes, yes.
In order for our new government to go into effect, it first had to be ratified by 9 out of 13 states. And many thought we were trying to rob them of those liberties we had all fought a war over. When I say we, I am of course referring to myself, the one of the two of us who actually fought in the war. It's true.
In the struggle for liberty, some fight with swords and some fight with words. We need both if we are going to remain a free people, no matter how powerful our military is or becomes. It is not our military that makes us great. Even tyrannical governments have powerful militaries. What makes America great is that we put reason ahead of force. An excellent example of someone who never fired a shot in service of his country nor raised a sword in anger, yet did as much or more as any man who has ever lived to defend and preserve liberty for ourselves and our posterity is our mutual friend and colleague, James Madison.
Actually, James, could we have you back up
James
here?
Madison.
James Madison?
Yes, a round of applause for James Madison, yes.
Now, James Madison and I knew that our new government would not stand a chance if people listened only to the local politicians. You see, can you stand over here, James? There we go. It was the local legislatures and governors who stood to lose the most power when the government went into effect, and so spoke heartily against it. Right, James? Yes. So Jemmy and I, we called him Jemmy, we decided that it would be best if he and I and John Jay were to pen a series of articles for the newspapers to explain why we needed this new government and how it would better the lives of all of our countrymen.
Yet, Mr. Madison, I respect your work on the Federalist Papers. As a matter of fact, all of the Federalist Papers were well written, even the ones that Mr. Hamilton wrote. But I wouldn't know which ones Mr. Hamilton wrote or which ones you wrote because none of you signed your own names to them.
We all adopted the pen name of Publius. Something amusing about that. Publius, seriously? It's a typical Roman name. Publius.
Publius Valerius Publicola in 509 BC helped to throw off the ancient and corrupt government of Rome, the Roman kings, and then he continued to help his country by helping to establish a new and better government, the Roman Republic, much of which is the basis for our own government. While I respect Publius a great deal, I'm still not quite sure why you used his name.
Mr. Madison, if I may, many Americans at that time knew well who Publius was and respected him. By taking on his name, we reminded Americans of the great things he had done, yes? And implied we were essentially trying to do the same thing, yes? Yeah.
So, Mr. Madison, tell me if I understand this correctly. Are you telling me that you and Alexander Hamilton and John Jay all pretended to be a famous statesman from a long time ago so that you could better explain the Constitution to Americans? Is that what you did?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's a brilliant idea. I wonder if anyone else will ever do that.
Still 7 months, 175,000 words, and 85 essays later, we had a new government.
A new government entirely based on the authority of the people.
Hardly, no. No, the people are variable and changing. They seldom judge or determine right. That's why it's a very good thing, Mr. Madison, that we've had the Electoral College put into the Constitution, so that the common man may not elect the President of these United States, but only learned men, educated men, statesmen, men who perhaps actually know the individual who's standing for office ought to elect President of these United States. That's good government.
But, Mr. Madison, I understand that you placed the Electoral College in the Constitution as a temporary measure. But, well, all of you, many of you at least, someday when you grow up, you're going to vote in a presidential election. Maybe a lot of them. Are you aware that none of your votes will ever count? Have you learned about the Electoral College? Do you like the Electoral College? Would you like your votes to count for the president? I have good news for you. I'm not sure I want your vote to count. I'm a little scared of you. But everyone else, no, it's fine. I have good news for you. You can change that. You can change any part of the Constitution you want to change. The president is not allowed to change the Constitution. You helped set that up. The Supreme Court is not allowed to change any part of the Constitution, neither is the legislature. The legislature can suggest a constitutional convention, but then the states in conventions or the state legislatures have to be the ones to ratify the amendments because they're closer to you. You can change the Constitution and make it so your vote counts. When the American people finally realize their vote doesn't count for the president, they will change that and make their vote count. Thus, the people, being the only force allowed to change the Constitution, are the most important part of the nation.
The people are certainly important, but James, in the Federalist Papers, if I'm not mistaken, you wrote, in framing a government, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, you must oblige it to control itself. Yes? And that's what we've done here with our government. We've got the three branches, one to counter the other. It is inconceivable that one branch of the government could grow so overpowerful it could overmatch the other two, yes? Well, that's good government. Well done, James.
But, Mr. Madison, trusting one branch of the federal government to watch over another branch of the federal government to protect the liberties of the people, well, that's like trusting one wolf to watch over another wolf to protect the lives of the sheep. It simply won't work. The only able guardians of the people's liberty are and shall always be the people themselves, which is why the people are more important. Right?
People certainly are important. They have their voice here. They rule through their elected representatives in the House of Representatives. But why have government at all? Because the passions of man will not conform themselves to the dictates of reason without enforcement. So we must have government. And it is, as Alexander Pope has been wont to say, for forms of government let fools contest. What's best administered is best. And here we have good government. Right, James? Very good. Thank you.
Having a good government is important.
You're not done yet. Almost.
Having a good government is important, but the people are more important.
The people are certainly important. They have their say, but it's good government.
Government's important, but the people are more important.
Government.
People.
Government.
People.
Government.
People.
Government.
I'm sorry, Mr. Madison. It seems as though you've gotten between us. It keeps happening to people,
doesn't
it?
Well,
perhaps
thank
give
you,
Mr. Madison a round of applause. Well done.
Now
you
you can
excellent
go.
job. Excellent job. Now, my friends, I feel that we have gone well into our time with you, but I think it is appropriate now to utilize the rest of our time to open the floor to questions that you might have for us. Who has the first question?
Very well. Move on to the second question. Oh, yes, so over there in the red.
Mr. Jefferson, why did he buy the Louisiana Purchase even though it wasn't in the Constitution?
What an excellent question. What an excellent question. Yes, you having your strict interpretation of the Constitution, saying that if it's not written in the Constitution, we don't have a right to have it, then how is it that you could purchase the Louisiana Territory?
Are you done?
No, you overstepped your mandate now, didn't you? Wouldn't
No,
be the first
perhaps.
time, or
Now,
the
wait.
last.
Now, listen, celerity is often necessary in international diplomacy. Celerity, it means speed. Napoleon gave us 8 months to ratify the treaty. It takes a month to get across the ocean, 3 months to get back. Anything can happen in the middle. If we had waited the amount of time it would have taken for us to ratify the constitutional amendment that I myself wrote for this issue, we would have gone over the deadline. Napoleon would have changed his mind. The opportunity would have been lost because of a legal scruple. Instead, I acted in the responsibility of the chief executive, which is in an emergency to take the responsibility on himself and to act swiftly. The judiciary branch and the legislative branches cannot act swiftly. They're built not to act swiftly. Only the executive can. And then in an election year, 1804, I published everything that I did. The price of the Louisiana Purchase, the size of the territory, all the information to the American people so they could make their judgment. In essence, I said to the American people, have I done for you what you would have done for yourselves if you had been given the time, i.e., a constitutional amendment? If I'd been thrown out of office or barely won by the slightest of margins like in 1800, that would have been a warning or a punishment by the American people that I'd overstepped my bounds. But instead, I won the election of 1804 overwhelmingly. Does anyone here remember the name of the candidate that the Federalists put forward for president in 1804? Other than you. Do you remember his name, yes? No, not Aaron Burr. Oh, no. No.
We can come back to that if you like.
Well, his name was Charles Coatsworth Pinckney. Don't worry, you don't have to remember his name. I beat him that badly. It was what you would call a landslide. The American people, fully knowing what I had done, said, yes, we didn't have the time for a constitutional amendment, but we needed to do this. It was necessary, and you did it. And thus I turned to my mandate, the mandate of our whole government, to the people themselves.
You know, I happen to have a copy of our unnecessary Bill of Rights here.
Unnecessary?
But I seem to have misplaced my spectacles. I was wondering if you could read for me Article the 10th.
You want me to read the 10th Amendment in our Bill of Rights?
In our unnecessary Bill of Rights,
unnecessary. Yes. We'll get to that later. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people.
Unless your name is Thomas Jefferson.
What?
Wait, it doesn't say that. Interesting. Perhaps we ought to move on to another question. Yes, young fella.
Why didn't you shoot back at Aaron Burr? When
You know, I'm very often asked questions about Vice President Burr, and at the same time, I'm usually enjoined against dueling. Now, I know it must be an extraordinary thing for you to imagine in your time that a Vice President of the United States should shoot someone, but in my time, Aaron Burr, Vice President Burr, was a duelist. Now, Aaron Burr and I have practiced. I've known Aaron Burr for a long time. Aaron Burr and I were in the war together. He was an aide-de-camp or military secretary to General Washington, as was I. He lasted in that position about a month. I lasted for 4 years. You know, he and the general did not get on. He is an attorney in New York. I'm an attorney in New York. We have argued on the same sides of cases. We have argued on opposite sides of cases. I've never found much substance in his arguments. And when it came to the election of 1800 and the tie between Jefferson and Aaron Burr, the reason I backed Jefferson is that though Jefferson be a man of very different principles, at least he has them.
Oh, thank you.
Something I suspect not with Aaron Burr. I will give you an example. When we were at war with France, and after General Washington had died, I was left commander of the army. Aaron Burr said that I could go in and take over the government with the army. And I said, of course, this is reprehensible. You can't even talk about such a thing. And Aaron Burr said, great men do not trifle over morsels. That's the man who stood within a hair's breadth of becoming president of these United States. Now, as to dueling, I believe it is murder, and I've worked to make it illegal, but I will own that sometimes a man must stand to his honor. My son became involved in a duel, and he asked me what he should do should he be in a duel, and I said that you sometimes must stand to your honor, but you, in order to avoid murder, you will stand on the field of honor, and you will choose to cast your shot aside. Now, he did that, and the other fellow killed my son dead. If I were to fight a duel, and lose, I couldn't very well talk about it, now could I? But if I were to fight a duel, I hope I would have the temerity to follow the same advice I gave my own son in this instance. Thank you.
Another question.
Another question, yes.
Some time, yes. Let's see, all the way in the back with the green shirt there, yes. Yes, you?
Yes, you.
How did I feel when I found out that Alexander Hamilton had been killed in a duel with Aaron Burr? Yes?
What?
Sorry. Awkward. This was, of course, the summer of 1804, the summer of the election that I just told you about, my second election to President of the United States. Alexander Hamilton and I, as you've seen today, disagree on many, many subjects. But I never wanted to see that happen. That violence is certainly a means that sometimes you are forced to defend yourself. That is my philosophy as a nation and for the national policy, and that is my personal philosophy. But violence never solves anything except the problem of being attacked. Other than that, it won't solve an argument. And a duel doesn't prove your honor. It doesn't prove that you're right. Aaron Burr didn't prove anything but that he was a murderer. I disagreed with Alexander Hamilton, but as my presidency went on, I found I agreed with more of his ideas, not completely, but with more of them. And I felt that if time had gone on and we had been able to discuss things together, if I would have stuck with the simple reason and proof that I always had, he would have come more in my direction and seen the light. If only he had been given the time to live a full life. So I felt it was a tragedy and a crime. I never wanted to see anything like that happen.
Another question. Yes, the fellow in the same row. Could you stand up?
So we can hear you, yes. Why do I own slaves even though I think it is immoral?
It's a good question.
I was born a slave owner. I'm going to ask you a question. I want you all to for a moment, close your eyes and recall to your mind your first memory. Don't say it out loud, just recall it to yourself. The earliest thing you can remember. All right, open your eyes. Now, in your case, that might be your family, your mother, your brothers or sisters, a pet, your home, your mother's cooking. I'm now going to tell you what my first memory is that I wrote later in my life when I was writing my life story. My first memory is when I was 2 years old, and my family was moving from the home my father, Peter Jefferson, built. The home was called Shadwell, just outside of Charlottesville, Virginia. And we're moving to a home called Tuckahoe, closer to Richmond. And I remember being carried on the back of a horse on a pillow by a slave. My first memory is not my mother or family or father or home. My first memory is a slave. And from the age of 2, when I began to remember things, I always saw slaves. I was always with slaves. They were around me. My closest friends as a boy, many of them were slaves. I didn't even quite realize they were slaves. They were my friends. One of my friends, slaves I grew up with, Jupiter, he and I grew up together. We stayed friends. He came with me to Philadelphia. I became used to it. What would you do if something you've grown up with, maybe you don't even question it right now, but something you've grown up with and you're used to since you were 2 years old, you maybe now or in a few years, you begin to think, oh, wait, I may be used to that, but there's something wrong with it. You'd be in trouble. I had to face that as well. I depended on slavery. I still do. Virginia depended on slavery. Even New York depends on slavery. America depended on slavery as a force of labor to provide the economy to afford our Revolutionary War. Wars are very expensive. This doesn't make slavery right or good, but it makes it necessary. And I fought during my life to find a practicable means of ending slavery without splitting the nation in half. I tried to include a paragraph in the Declaration of Independence that condemns slavery. I had to remove it. That would have split us in half in 1776. We had to keep all mention of slavery out of the Constitution. We couldn't make it illegal there because it would have split the nation in half in 1787. How do we find a way to solve the problem without destroying America before she becomes strong enough to handle the problem? I depend on it personally. America depends on it. This doesn't make it right, but I must admit to you, I failed in solving the problem.
Another question. Let's see. We haven't taken one. In the white. So, can you say that louder, please?
Stand up. Oh, why did we form 2 political parties when George Washington argued in his farewell address to not form political parties?
A very easy question for myself to answer. I did not form a political party. I was part of the government, and then the anti-federalists rose up under the head of Mr. Jefferson's work, if you will. And then, of course, in elections, we had to counter that. So we were the government's party. We were federalists. We believed in the federal government.
Mr. Hamilton is, and always has, he is mistaking his party for the government. So any criticism then of Mr. Hamilton's party while it was in power, he argued, and the Federalists argued, was a criticism not only of the government, but attack on the government and attack on the Constitution itself. I began to see that, and began to see that by George Washington's second term, for all his protestations, he was a Federalist. He was a man of a certain representation, a certain area of thought, though he protested against being a member of a party. We had to find some way to make it so the people of America were allowed to criticize their government without being accused of treason. Yet that's what was happening. And it got to its worst point under the Alien and Sedition Acts, where you could be arrested for criticizing your government and thrown in jail. So, I don't feel that I formed a party, but I certainly gathered Americans together, gathered opinion together, and certainly organized Americans to protest against actions of the government that many Americans did disagree with. I would also like to see a day when America doesn't need parties. But if you find that people, when you criticize your government, if they accuse you of being treasonous, well then, I suppose you still need parties. We must have a day when in America, citizens are allowed to speak out without being thrown in jail or accused of hating their country.
Another question? Yes, young fella.
Oh.
How is it to come to America after living in the Caribbean? I grew up in, thank you for your question. I grew up in the British West Indies. It was decidedly different there, much warmer. Also, have any of you ever been to the islands? Raise your hand if you've been to the islands. You can tell life moves at a certain pace there, and it's not very quickly. When I came to these United States, I came first to Boston, then made my way very quickly to New York City, where I had letters of introduction. And how many of you have been to New York City? Yes. The pace there is what? Fast and frenetic. And I took to that like a duck to water. I loved it, and it became my adoptive home. All sorts of things, all the shops, everything happening at once. It was remarkable, and I never went back to the islands, though I'm still in touch with my brother who's there. The islands, perhaps you know, perhaps you don't, the population in the islands is about 80% slave and about 20% white. Therefore, there are always great fears of slave insurrections. When at 13 years of age, I was required to go to the local fort and march and drill with the soldiery. So it was when the war broke out, I was a man of some experience in arms. But decidedly different here.
I think, though, that we may have run to the terminus of our time, Mr. Hammond. Though these questions are excellent, and I would...
Thank you so much.
But thank you very much for your questions. It was a pleasure speaking with you all today.
Thank you very much.